am afraid of the weekend coming. Life in the dream home has just begun. Currently, we are hosting a party every week at our home to welcome my in-laws. My wishes are not reflected, and my time for rest is being cut short. At the party, I am made to work as hands and feet for my in-laws. My spouse and I have been married for 3 years, working together. In the early days of our marriage, we lived in a 2-room rental apartment. Hey, shall we start building our own house soon? Yes, I also want to live in our own house. Buying a house was a big investment. I supported my husband, who is loose with money, and worked hard on saving and budgeting. Finally, we were able to see the possibility of buying our own house and started looking for a property. How's the property search going? There's so much to decide, nothing has been finalized yet. I spent my holidays on property searches, and fatigue accumulated. Hey, could you help out a bit? I can't, I have work. You're really not reliable. Oh, right. How about searching with my parents? Why? I don't want to bother your parents. It's fine. My parents are also concerned. What do you mean? Well, it's all right. It's all right. Although I was concerned about my husband's hesitant talk, honestly, I was not good at getting along with my in-laws and preferred to avoid spending time together. Despite this, contrary to my expectations, I was contacted by my in-laws right away. Hey, have you decided on the new house? I was thinking of asking a construction company run by my friend. No, we want to decide on the new house by ourselves. Despite my indirect refusal, a few days later, I heard from a contact about a very good piece of land. I heard the construction company hasn't contacted you. Did you make sure to contact them? Before I knew it, plans were underway to build a house on a piece of land I didn't know about, by a construction company I didn't even know. Actually, we want to decide everything by ourselves. Oh, my son said he wants us to take care of it. Make sure all the appliances are fully electric. The intervention by my in-laws became stronger day by day. I asked my husband to ask his parents to stop interfering. Why can't you accept my parents' suggestions? I want to hear your thoughts. It's noisy. Just take my parents' opinions as mine. How can you say that? Proposing to create a vegetable patch where the car is supposed to be parked or installing a pizza oven in the kitchen, are those really your ideas? After such exchanges, one day came just before the construction was to start. Please confirm the contents of this contract one more time. It was a call from the construction company we had commissioned to build the new house. Since I had thoroughly discussed it with the architect, I replied, yes, there's no problem. Is there any mistake? The person from the construction company continued somewhat reluctantly. I had heard it was for you and your spouse to live in. Yes, that's right. What about it? Then the person from the construction company shared a shocking fact. This design, it's almost like it's for a 2-generation household. I felt a sensation of my head turning blank. That's not right. I don't know how the plan was carried out, but my in-laws had intervened without permission in the design I confirmed with the construction company, saying changes are necessary and had it altered. Moreover, they spoke as if I had agreed to those changes. The construction company was also perplexed, and I deeply apologize. Then farm tools were delivered to where the garage was supposed to be made, and it had been switched to a plan to start a home garden. This, too, was the work of my in-laws. The builder asked me, is it really okay to start construction? A few days later, a notice of unexpected furniture delivery was in the mailbox. It was cash on delivery, and again, this was the work of my in-laws. This was clearly overstepping. It was no longer possible to solve this through my husband. I reached my limit of patience and appealed directly to my in-laws. Father, mother, please stop acting on your own. Why is it bad? It's wrong for you to interfere in the house we will live in. What? Our house? Incredibly, it seemed my in-laws had assumed we would be living together. I hurriedly contacted my husband. Your parents have a big misunderstanding. What do you mean? They think they will live in our new house with us. Oh, that conversation. My heart chilled at my husband's calm reaction. I couldn't believe it. I think that's the best idea. What are you talking about? I haven't heard anything about this. Well, I'm telling you now. That should be enough. Unbelievable. I absolutely oppose it. Wait a minute. This is about my parents. Why do you oppose it? It seemed my husband had no doubts about living with his parents. On the other hand, he pressed as if to blame me for my opposition. Can't you, as a wife, get along with my parents? But the design was changed without my consent. Well, the elderly like to meddle. It's from goodwill. That's not possible. There's no trust between me, you, and your parents. We can build that trust from now on. The problem is now. I can't live with people I can't trust. You're being too sensitive. Then, we should cancel the new house plan. Stop the construction. Let's calm down. My firm opposition led to the cancellation of the plan to live with my in-laws. Doubts about my husband remained unresolved, and it seemed he was also dissatisfied with me. Amidst this, our new house was finally completed. I felt positive for the first time in a while about deepening our family bonds while cooperating with my husband in this house. On moving day, when we had settled the luggage, my husband broached an important topic. Now that we have our own house, I've started to feel the responsibility of being the head of the family. I see. I want you to listen. I want you, as my wife, to have that sense of responsibility too. Being a wife, isn't that a bit much? Hey, I'm being serious here. I felt a bit of discomfort at my husband's confident posture with his arms crossed. However, thinking it was good that he started to feel a sense of responsibility, I replied, yes, understood, but I would soon regret that decision. It was the weekend, and my husband called me on his way home. Tomorrow, I've invited some colleagues from work over. I need you to prepare for the party. What, tomorrow? Why so sudden? Why? Because it's tomorrow. You'll have time to prepare. But I have a hair salon appointment tomorrow. What are you talking about? Think about what's more important. My husband insisted. My parents will come over to help, so be thankful. What? It was the first weekend after moving into our new house. I was looking forward to changing the layout of the kitchen and living room, but my excitement vanished in an instant. Furthermore, those in-laws of mine were coming to help. I couldn't help but feel anxious. On the day of the home party, my in-laws arrived early in the morning. As I was busy with the food preparation, when I asked for their help, they said, "Oh, such plain dishes. At least order some finger food. I'll handle the ordering." Actually, the food is already prepared and we have finger food ready. We can't afford any more orders. What are you saying? Are you trying to shame your husband? Being stingy could affect your husband's promotion. What an understanding wife you are. Could you help with the party preparations instead? Sorry, I have a hair salon appointment. See you later. Make sure to set up the food properly when it arrives. Leaving those words behind, my in-laws went out after only making their demands known. My husband was still asleep in his room. Somehow, I managed to finish the party preparations in time. When I tried to get myself ready before the guests arrived. Look, this place is dirty. Hey, what's this dust in the entrance? Clean it properly. We're running low on beer, go buy more. Ordered around by my husband and in-laws, who had just gotten ready, I ended up welcoming the guests without even having time to put on makeup. Welcome, everyone. Please, this way. Now, serve the guests some drinks. Hurry up, will you? The party that day was the toughest for me. My stylish mother-in-law treated me like a servant. Without introducing me, when I greeted a few guests myself, they were puzzled by my appearance in a greasy apron without makeup. They probably thought I was a servant of the house, which was humiliating. Afterward, my husband started to host parties every weekend. and my in-laws never failed to visit. Colleagues from work, their families, and even neighbors were invited without prior consultation. My in-laws continued to play the glamorous hosts at the parties without offering any help, ordering me around. My husband adopted the same attitude as his parents. Initially, I complained to my husband, "Please, let's not have parties every weekend. Why not? Everyone's having fun. I work too, and preparing for parties all weekend really wears me out. My parents are helping, aren't they?" "Helping? You call that helping? It's because you can't handle the guests that my parents are stepping in. All your parents do is eat and talk without preparing or cleaning up." "What do you mean? There's no need to talk about my parents like that." "But it's true. First of all, it's because you refuse to live with them that my parents have to come from far away." I sighed internally at this exchange. My husband always brought up the fact that I had refused to live with his parents whenever I objected to something. He continued to argue that since I had accepted his requests, I should also listen to his desires. Amidst the days spent without rest, I suddenly realized that I hadn't yet invited my own parents to our new house. So I proposed, "I want to skip the party this weekend and invite my parents over." "What are you talking about?" "No, I object." "Ha, object? Do you even have the awareness of being a wife? You married into my family. And above all, don't belittle my parents." "I'm not belittling anyone." "Well, I don't mind you inviting them, but my parents come first. But your parents come every weekend, and because of the parties, I can never invite mine." How did it come to this? How much more does my husband expect me to sacrifice? Reaching this thought, I decided that I needed to consult someone about this situation. So, I called my mother and told her everything that had happened. I apologized tearfully for not being able to invite her to our new house. My mother was surprised but listened to me calmly. "For now, come home this weekend, but I have to prepare for the party." "You still haven't realized it, have you?" "Realized what?" "You're losing sight of yourself because of exhaustion." Awakened by my mother's words, I felt enlightened. And then my mother continued, "I've come up with a plan, but I won't proceed if you're against it." Hearing the plan, I was taken aback. If executed, it would have a significant impact on my husband. I was left unsure whether to proceed. Talk to him one more time, then decide. My mother left the final decision up to me. I decided to talk to my husband again. "Why are we back to this topic?" "Just invite your parents when mine aren't here." I interrupted my husband's words and made my position clear. "Listen, this is your last chance. Not to plan home parties on his own. Of course, to get my consent for his parents' weekly visits too. And this time, to invite my parents." I conveyed these conditions, hoping my husband would accept them. "Last chance, you're joking. I won't allow you or your parents to do as you please anymore. Listen, since you refuse to live with my parents, you should prioritize them." As usual, my husband started blaming me for lacking family awareness. Furthermore, he stated, "A wife like you won't allow her family through our door. Never invite your parents, and if you're dissatisfied, leave." Realizing that arguing with him was futile, I had hoped patience would lead to his concession, but it was the opposite. Biting my lip, I conveyed my last hope, "You'll regret this." However, he scoffed, "I won't regret it, don't show your face to me again." With that, I left the house and spent some time at my parents' house. As time passed, I regained my composure. Following my husband had made me realize how brainwashed I had been. For my husband, it turned out that his self-esteem and vanity were more valuable than the concept of family. In his desire to appear admirable, he exploited our new house and his wife's role for selfish purposes. Afterward, I decided to listen to my mother's proposal. Several weeks had passed since I returned to my parents' home. My health had recovered. Since my workplace was close to my parents' home, my enthusiasm for work returned and I was living energetically. Yet, messages from my husband continued unabated, starting with, "I'll forgive you if," always from a position of superiority. He was always concerned about the preparations for the home parties. Lately, the gatherings we planned at our house were canceled. It's your fault. My position at work is getting worse because of this. How will you take responsibility? Think a little. I want you to fulfill your role as a wife at the important home parties. My husband was furious that I hadn't returned home, especially since he had a special home party planned for the end of the month. This party was to welcome important people from his workplace at our house, a highly prestigious event for him, supposedly ensuring his promotion if successful. On that special day, I, dressed up, headed to our home with my parents. My husband and in-laws were busy preparing to welcome the guests, managing the delivered food and drinks. My husband's bosses and colleagues were also present, and I exchanged greetings with them. "Oh, you look very charming in that dress." "Thank you." Seeing me, my husband and in-laws immediately approached with excitement. "Hey, what are you doing? Hurry up and help. What's with that outfit? What kind of wife are you, wandering around like that?" As my in-laws reached for the hem of my dress, my mother stepped forward from behind and clearly swatted their hands away. "Please don't touch the dress I designed with your greasy hands." "What is this? Who are you?" "Hey, that's my wife. You don't get to speak. It's unpleasant to be referred to in that manner towards my daughter." During this exchange, my husband's complexion rapidly changed. "You are what, daughter? You are the host of tonight's party, aren't you? Please show us around." "Oh, it was you who said we shouldn't cross the threshold of this house, right?" "Huh, what are you talking about? You said that?" Well, that." My husband's face turned from blue to red, changing like a traffic light. In fact, the guest of honor at today's gathering was my mother. My parents were executives in a major fashion industry company, and my husband's company had been planning to collaborate with the design department led by my mother for this fiscal year's business plan. Therefore, my husband suggested entertaining them with his proud home party. My mother, who operates under her maiden name, seemed unrecognized by my husband, although they had actually met before the marriage. Well, considering my husband's nature, he probably forgot. "Really, what kind of upbringing does your daughter have? Quick, to the kitchen. It's just right. Take your parents with you." "Stop it. This person is a special guest." "What?" My husband and in-laws were flustered and unsettled. My mother gave my husband a light glance, asking him to bring some drinks, please. Rushing to the kitchen, my husband returned with glasses. After checking the 2 glasses provided, she asked, "Could you also get one for my daughter?" Glancing at me, aware of his bosses and colleagues around, he brought a glass for me with his head down. I gracefully accepted it, giving my in-laws a firm look. "Could you also take care of the food?" What?" "Yes, understood. I'd like to sit down. Could you lend me a chair?" Yes, of course. Doesn't this seem like too few dishes?" Oh, does it? How about French? Shall we order some? Of course, the bill is on you." The budget is a bit. Oh dear, scrimping might affect your son's future, you know." While tilting my glass, I smiled warmly towards them. In fact, among those invited to today's party were individuals who had been acquainted with my mother from past visits to our house. And it seems they had relayed to my mother the cold treatment I received from my husband and in-laws at a previous home party. Dressed in a shabby apron, looking nothing like the lady of the house, I only realized she was your daughter when we exchanged greetings. She seemed very tired. My weakness had caused concern for my mother. Though I've regained my spirit now, that difficult period had weighed heavily on my heart. During the party, my mother kept my husband busy fetching drinks, continuously pointing out the work ethic of my in-laws, while my father deepened his acquaintance with people from my husband's workplace. After the party ended, I approached my husband. "Good work. Please, sign this." I handed him a divorce petition. Feeling humiliated by the day's events, my husband signed in a rage. Although my in-laws tried to stop him, my husband was resolute. "There, it's over. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Taking the divorce petition, I left my husband's house. Exiting the gate and looking back, I knew I would never return. Thus, I bid farewell to the dream home I once longed for. The house had changed my husband's character completely, and I had nearly lost myself in the process. My attachment to this house had already vanished. Leaving the home party behind felt liberating. Afterward, I focused on my work, trying to forget the unpleasant memories of the past. With the divorce, being freed from the mortgage payments of my husband's house and the expenses related to the parties, I found financial relief. I started a new life in a rented apartment, away from my parents' home. My ex-husband was transferred to another region by his company, seemingly seen as a liability in the business dealings involving my mother. Moving to a new place, my ex-husband could no longer live in the previous house. Burdened with the house's mortgage on his own, he sought support from his parents, who apparently refused. As a result, there's been tension between my ex-husband and his parents. What became of the house after I left is unknown to me. I've overcome past difficulties, decorating my new place to my liking, improving my cooking skills on weekends, and leading a fulfilling life. Occasionally, I invite my parents over and host small home parties with homemade dishes. In this way, I've been able to spend warm and wonderful times with my family. Moving forward, I plan to cherish my parents and live with gratitude for each happy day. My name is Megan. I've been married for 10 years and am now in my early 40s. We don't have any children, but my life with my beloved husband, Kevin, is very peaceful and blissful. Kevin is a typical company employee without any major changes in his life and 5 years older than me. But since I'm working part-time, our two-person household has a reasonable amount of financial leeway, allowing us some luxuries. Our married life has been smooth without any major ups and downs. However, a minor incident started causing ripples in our tranquil daily life. This incident involved the news of my beloved father's death and inheriting his apartment. When we got married, my father started living alone in a new, modern two-bedroom apartment he had purchased. On the other hand, Kevin and I lived in my childhood home, a four-bedroom apartment filled with memories. This childhood home was transferred to me from my father when I got married. Before that, my father, mother, and I used to live there. When I got married, my father gave it to me with his blessings for our happiness. He suggested, "Why not start your new life in this home?" I was elated by his offer. Later on, when my father passed away, I inherited the new two-bedroom apartment he was living in. I was very fond of that apartment, so I decided to rent it out immediately. However, one day, during a conversation with my in-laws, an unexpected suggestion came up. Sarah and her children are living in a small place. How about they move to Megan's four-bedroom apartment? Sarah is Kevin's younger sister who was divorced and raising 3 kids. They were living in a two-bedroom apartment, which might be a bit tight for them. But to be honest, my relationship with Sarah has not been great. Every time we met, she would make slightly sarcastic remarks about us not having children yet. Kevin and I decided to get married when we were just under 30. Since then, Sarah started to make pointed remarks. After crossing 30, her comments became even more hurtful. Remarks like, "You're already past 30 and you still have no kids?" Or "Aren't you seen as less of a woman without children?" were thrown in jest. But what shocked me the most was an incident after my beloved father passed away. Sarah said, "It's a pity you couldn't show your father the face of his grandchild." It was a moment that left me cold. Sarah is actually 3 years older than me. Instead of a younger sister-in-law, she's more like an older one. We've always tried to treat her as family and interacted with her amicably. But after such remarks, I naturally built a wall in my heart against her. I'm an only child, and my only family was my father. Amidst the grief of losing him, Sarah's words were truly shocking. Time had passed since my father's death, and I hadn't seen Sarah for a while. But out of the blue, my mother-in-law made a surprising proposal. Sarah says she'll pay $500 in rent each month. Looking at my mother-in-law's smug face, I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything. The apartment we lived in was a bit old, but we had taken good care of it, so it was still in a usable condition. There was a big shopping mall nearby, and we could easily take trains and buses. So, if we were to rent out this apartment, I thought it wouldn't go for less than $2,000 a month. But $500? I was truly surprised. Do they even understand the going rate for this area? It's unthinkable for this spacious 4-bedroom apartment's monthly rent to be just $500. Maybe they had assumed that I had agreed because I didn't say anything? My mother-in-law seemed very enthusiastic about the idea. You guys already have another apartment, right? You can just live there. Even if you don't renew the lease, later on, Sarah and the others will move there, so it's fine. How long is the contract term? Kevin was also very excited, saying, "That's really a great idea. The place where your father lived is new and lovely, and it's perfect for just the two of us." At this rate, I felt like the conversation was progressing without considering our opinions, and I started to panic. I couldn't help but blurt out, "Isn't there an option for all of us to live together in this apartment?" My in-laws' house was big and they were the only ones living there. Rooms for Kevin and Sarah are also available, so I thought it would be no problem if they moved in. After all, they've said they want to live in a bigger place. Normally, before making such moves, you would consult with your family, I think. However, moving to the in-laws would mean the kids changing schools, and they seem concerned about the hassle and cost of buying new school uniforms and gym clothes. I was hesitant to clearly express my reluctance to rent to Sarah in front of my mother-in-law, but I told her, "This place is my hometown. I can't just leave easily." I left their house that day, but my mother-in-law said, "You don't have to decide right away," which made me feel she hasn't given up. When I returned home, I asked Kevin, "This apartment is precious to us? Why are you deciding so easily to leave?" He looked surprised and responded, "Well, it's not a single-family home." I was a bit shocked by his reply. Perhaps because he grew up in a single-family home, an apartment doesn't feel like a real home to him. But I wish he could at least apologize for not understanding my feelings. Upset, I raised my voice. "It's my home, my apartment. Why are you deciding things without consulting me?" Kevin looked upset. "We've been married for 10 years. Why do you say my apartment? It's our apartment." His voice contained a hint of anger. I wished he could understand how I feel about this apartment as my cherished home. If he had hesitated to rent the apartment to his sister, I might not have felt hurt by his words "our place." But at that moment, I felt hurt. We tried to calmly discuss it many times after that, but it wasn't easy. Kevin seemed not to understand my feelings at all, and I got words like money-minded, stubborn, and selfish thrown at me. As time passed and the seasons changed, the wall between us remained unchanged. During that time, I kept receiving messages from my mother-in-law asking if the discussions about living together were progressing. The pressure from my mother-in-law and Kevin, who wouldn't understand my perspective, slowly wore me down. I felt I was reaching my breaking point. One day, I was shocked to receive an email from Sarah. It says, "Why are you two, without kids, hesitating to move out of such a small space? You don't need that big of a place. Just leave." I hadn't heard from Sarah since our discussions about the apartment, and yet here she was, out of the blue, telling me to leave. I never imagined I'd receive such a direct email. Reading that message, I reflected on how much I had endured and felt deep self-loathing. The idea of divorce crossed my mind several times. I tried to calm myself each time, but I felt like I was at my limit. I decided to go to the local government office to initiate divorce proceedings. I also decided to reach out to a specific place for the next steps. A few days later, with a renewed mindset, I visited the court. Upon checking, it turned out that both the apartment I lived in and the one I was renting out were all under my name. It was my apartment. Confirming this fact, I decided to confront my relationship with my husband and thought about what I should do next. I wanted to thoroughly discuss everything with him. I've told you many times, this is my house. I just can't stand the idea of renting this apartment to Sarah. I don't want to rent my home to someone who belittles and looks down on me. Please persuade your mother and Sarah, I said. Kevin's face darkened, looking like he was thinking this topic again. I had told Kevin about all the harassment I received from Sarah and how much I disliked her. I wanted him to understand my feelings. But the outcome was different. Kevin sided with Sarah, saying, "Sarah is right. In hindsight, I could have gotten a divorce at that point, saving myself from this anguish. But I couldn't end a relationship that had lasted for 10 years so easily. If Kevin rejected my proposal, I was prepared to divorce. Deep down, I felt that way. Maybe you're just being overly sensitive about Sarah? Perhaps you feel she's being condescending, but maybe you're exaggerating things. I really don't understand why you feel this way," Kevin said, making light of my feelings without knowing the whole story. His words stung. Was I the only one feeling like this? If that's the case, will you sign this? I presented him with the divorce papers. A look of shock appeared in Kevin's eyes, but he immediately said, "Do you really feel that way? You want to end our relationship over such a trivial matter? I'm serious. I care about Sarah too, and I always wanted to be with you. But recently, our relationship feels different. I don't feel the love anymore, so I'm leaving," I said while looking into his eyes. My heart ached at Kevin's attitude. His casual smile hinted that he didn't grasp the gravity of my feelings, and I felt a tear threatening to spill. I wished he would leave sooner rather than later. Maybe Sarah and your mother don't necessarily want to get along with you. Have you ever considered that because you always think about yourself? That's why our relationship is like this," Kevin said in a slightly softer tone. "This is how we always were, misunderstanding each other even while trying to care for one another. Look, I think it might be impossible to fix our relationship, no matter how much we talk. I feel there's still a distance between our hearts. I can't even imagine a future with you anymore. If you won't respond to my feelings, then we'll have to take legal action," I explained slowly. Kevin, with a mix of surprise and sadness on his face, quivered. "Do you really feel that way?" Afterwards, he left the house without a word. He probably didn't want to talk anymore and just wanted to escape the situation. He hadn't signed the divorce papers, and he left his belongings behind. A few days later, Kevin returned. His eyes looked sad and somewhat wary. "What should we do from here?" he gently asked. He might think I'd forgive him if he humbled himself, but everything is already settled. There's nothing left to discuss. If you agree to the divorce, sign these documents. If you can't, then we'll have to seek legal action. And also, I'm letting go of this house," I said. Actually, I had been considering selling the house for some time. The day I went to get the documents, I had consulted with Mr. Thomas, an old friend of my father's. I've known him since I was a child. He was by my father's side until his last day. Mr. Thomas, who attended my father's funeral, gave me his business card and asked to be contacted if any problems arose. The card listed his law firm's details. With Mr. Thomas' introduction, I was fortunate to get assistance from a judicial scrivener regarding the inheritance my father left behind. When I told Mr. Thomas about my situation, he gave sincere advice. He informed me about the importance of verifying ownership, handling complications in divorce negotiations, and other helpful tips. Thanks to his advice, I could protect myself. After Kevin temporarily left the house, I decided to sell the apartment. I quickly reached out to real estate agents and informed them of my intentions to sell. I also informed Mr. Thomas about the deteriorating relationship with Kevin, his refusal to sign the divorce papers, and sought his support for the divorce procedures. When Kevin found out about the sale of the apartment, he reacted with both shock and anger. "You always said this was our family home. Are you really planning to let go of such an important place? And after being so concerned about Sarah, you're truly selfish." But his words no longer unsettled me. "Do you have anything else to say?" I asked, looking him straight in the eyes, and took a deep breath. He was momentarily taken aback, but quickly began to assert his views. Why would you decide such an important matter on your own? The apartment might be in your name, but after a divorce, there should be a division of property. This apartment is the property of both of us who live here, right? Kevin became emotional and pleaded with desperation. In response, I gave him a slight smile and replied, "Actually, this apartment has been under my name even before we got married. I've already checked with my lawyer, and any property acquired before marriage is not subject to property division." Selling the apartment, of course, had its resistance, but I didn't want to leave behind more painful memories in this place. With the information about property division from Mr. Thomas, I decisively chose to sell. Kevin, upon learning the truth, suddenly changed his attitude. "I'm sorry. This place is special to you, but it hasn't been sold yet, right? Please reconsider. Why don't we give it another shot together? I'll explain things to Sarah and Mom. Please, just stop the divorce and the apartment sale." In his words, I questioned myself why I had stayed with him for 10 long years. I'm dumbfounded that I chose someone like him. Don't put on a nice face now. When we were together, you never once took my side, did you? Thinking of starting over with you now is unfathomable. So please, leave. We both need a fresh start. He wasn't easily convinced, creating a vast rift between us. But after navigating through various procedures, I finally managed to end our relationship. It's the beginning of a new life. The idea of being alone was initially daunting, but I realized it isn't as scary as it seemed. Now, I live in a new 2-bedroom apartment, living life on my terms. Don't worry, my mom is here, and even if you were gone, it would be fine. There's no problem at all," my husband coldly declared. The words were shocking to me, who had been sending $2,300 every month to my in-laws. Furthermore, my mother-in-law added insult to injury right there. "A wife who can't do proper housework is not needed," she said with a cold expression. She looked almost happy, as if she was expecting me to be thrown out. Realizing that it was futile to keep serving these people, I decided to leave. Then I answered calmly with a smile, "Really? If that's what you say, then I understand. I will leave." To this, my husband Scott exclaimed in surprise, "What?" My name is Claire, a 32-year-old office worker. I met my husband, Scott, through a blind date arranged by a friend. He was bright and sociable, and we quickly got along, got married, and now it's our 5th year of marriage. We don't have any children yet. Scott had been living with his mother until we married, but upon marrying, we built a new house on his family's property. It was Scott's suggestion at the time of our marriage. Because I'm worried about my mom living alone, I want to be near her. But I also want our newlywed life to be just the two of us, so I think this is the best. But won't there be a mortgage for building the house? I wondered. The payments for the house can be fully covered with the inheritance left by my deceased father, so there's no need for a mortgage. The house will be in my name, and there's no cost for the land either. I think it's fine if we just repay in the form of monthly support for my mom. What do you think? Is that okay? Aren't you worried about your mother's livelihood? We'll be supporting her, and she has her part-time job income and her pension, so it's fine. Okay. That's reassuring. Furthermore, when Claire works late, she might help with the housework. That will be a help to you, right? Even though we would live in separate houses on the same property, I was filled with hope at the thought of enjoying our newlywed life and building our dream home. Moreover, getting support with housework during busy times seemed ideal. However, I would later bitterly realize how naive this thought was. The beginning of our marriage was bliss itself. We were both busy with work, but the housework wasn't much, and our new house was clean and easy to maintain. My mother-in-law was also busy with her part-time job and didn't come over too often. The regular support for my mother-in-law and shared living expenses were split between my husband and me. But one day, Scott brought up a new proposal. "I'll take care of all the household expenses, so can Claire make the regular transfers to my mom? I want you to transfer it to her bank account every month." What? How much will it be? Maybe about $1,500 per month? But upon recalculating, I realized that $1,500 was less than the previous amount, so I decided to secretly send $2,300 a month without telling Scott. The monthly $2,300 took up a large part of my salary, but other living expenses like utilities, groceries, medical bills, and clothing were significantly higher, so in reality, Scott bore the greater burden. Scott's salary went into a shared account from which I made the transfers, and the remaining amount was added to our savings. This method worked well for a year, but as my mother-in-law quit her part-time job and began to visit more frequently, things started to go awry. I'm getting old, so I decided to quit my job and rest. That's okay, Mom. You don't have to push yourself anymore. We're here for you. Thank you, Scott. You're always so kind. At first, it was a pleasant interaction between mother and son. But looking around the house, it seems you haven't been cleaning properly. Look, there's dust accumulating in every corner. This is something I can't overlook. I'm really sorry. I've been so busy with work recently that I haven't been able to keep up with the housework. That's just an excuse. You're living in Scott's house, so you should at least do the basic housework. And about cooking, I've heard you often take shortcuts. Is that true? I often prepare simple meals when I come home late from work, but I still try my best. Maybe it was a mistake to choose you as Scott's wife. After all these years off marriage, the fact that you still don't have children is also an issue. I think that the fact we don't have children may not necessarily be my fault, but arguing back would only lead to more conflict. Originally, the agreement was that my mother-in-law would help with household chores during tough times when we started living together on the same property. However, it seems both my husband, Scott, and my mother-in-law have forgotten that promise. Anyway, when my mother-in-law is around, her unpleasant attacks are constant. So, I've chosen to ignore them. Amidst such circumstances, a bigger problem befell me. The balance in our joint account was visibly dwindling. The cause of the problem was that Scott's salary hadn't been deposited for 3 months. What does it mean that your salary hasn't been deposited? I confronted him. Oh, about that. Scott began reluctantly, and what he said next was truly shocking. He had quit his job and was looking for a new one. I thought he was going to work every day, but he had actually been job hunting. Why did you quit your job? And it's terrible not to tell me something so important. Yeah, sorry. I really feel bad about it. My boss was very strict, never-ending nagging even for minor mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, right? According to him, a mistake he made caused the company a significant loss. Normally, such mistakes would warrant a warning from a boss, but he didn't seem to acknowledge his fault. I would be troubled if I were his boss. But since he has already quit, I felt we needed to discuss what to do next. Is there any prospect of finding a new job? The problem is, I can't find a company that matches my skills. At this stage, shouldn't you look for a company that will hire you even if the conditions are lower? We can't afford to be picky right now, can we? No, I want to choose carefully for my next job where I plan to stay until retirement. But what about our finances? You work too, so you can support us a bit, right? It seemed his opinion wouldn't change no matter what, so I decided to endure until he found a new job, but our household income had halved. After excluding the regular remittances to my in-laws, the amount left was meager, forcing us to dip into our savings. In reality, there's hardly anything left. So, I decided to increase my working hours to boost my income a bit. Fortunately, my workplace values my abilities and readily agreed to my overtime requests. However, when I returned home late, my mother-in-law was often lying in wait. Why has it come to this? I can't believe a daughter-in-law doesn't do any housework. I'm sorry, it's because of work. Making excuses and going out to play, and then telling Scott to give you more money? I need the money for living expenses and remittances. My salary alone is not enough. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law showed her anger. What? Complaining about just $2,300 remittance. Living in Scott's house for free and neglecting household chores. Unbelievable. Taking the amount of $2,300 lightly was incomprehensible to me. It's the money I earned with hard work. My mother-in-law seems to take the monthly remittances for granted and has lost sight of their value. Because you don't do the housework, I have to, or Scott suffers. It's tough because of such an incompetent daughter-in-law. Although my mother-in-law takes a domineering attitude, she often relies on ready-made meals from the supermarket and only does laundry for herself and Scott. The kitchen is left with used dishes lying around. Scott and my mother-in-law have their dinner prepared, but not for me. I'm usually told to eat whatever is left. Scott relaxes on the sofa in front of the TV and responsive even as I face harsh words from my mother-in-law. My affection for my husband gradually faded. His job search is not progressing at all. Scott, driven by his high pride, only aims for top-tier companies. A year has passed without him finding a job, and he just spends his days relaxing at home. Hey, if this continues, our savings will run out. Can't you do a part-time job to contribute a little to our household expenses? What? Part-time job? Scott glared at me sharply. This house isn't my name, it's mine. You're just living here and can't even take care of me properly, so it's only natural for you to pay the living expenses. The future looks very uncertain if things continue like this. I'm paying for our living expenses and the remittances to your mother, you know? There's a limit to how much I can earn. Remittances, it's just $2,300, right? Stop nagging. If you don't like it, leave my house. Saying that, he hit the table and left the room. My husband trivialized the amount I worked hard to earn, calling it a mere $2,300. Our marital relationship had never been more discordant. Amidst this, unexpected good news arrived. Scott had a chance to get a job at a company run by a friend of his mother. While the salary wasn't as high as his previous job, I was grateful he would be working at all. The trial period was set for 3 months. I don't think this company suits my abilities, but it's hard to say no since my mom introduced me. Scott said, as long as you're willing to work, that's fine. Do your best for the formal employment. I replied. However, I couldn't have imagined that his new job would lead to further problems. Scott left for work energetically every morning, but after a month, he started coming home late and sometimes didn't come home at all. His jacket smelled of an unknown woman's perfume. Furthermore, he didn't contribute his salary to our household and even started withdrawing money from our joint account without permission. While continuing the remittances to my mother-in-law, I decided to stop depositing money into the joint account. This made Scott furious, and he confronted me. Why aren't you putting money in the account? The balance is almost zero. Where is your salary going? You're not contributing to the living expenses. Tell me how you're using the money. I demanded. Shut up. I have friends to socialize with. You wouldn't understand. He retorted. That's not right. Am I the only one to earn and manage our livelihood? If you contribute money, I will too. I argued. This house is mine. It's only natural for you to contribute money. Scott insisted. I was appalled by his insistence that I should use my earnings for his pocket money and pay for the remittances to his mother and our living expenses. Moreover, I suspected he was having an affair. Though I had no proof at that time, I decided to investigate his suspicious behavior. I couldn't afford a private investigator, so I had to do it myself. While Scott was sound asleep, I decided to check his phone. He usually used fingerprint authentication. While he was asleep, I used his right-hand finger to unlock the phone, and it worked. Checking his phone, frequent exchanges with a woman named Kristen became apparent. The content was shocking. Really enjoyed our date today. Wish we could be together forever. Would you consider marrying me? I'll get rid of my wife. Wait for me. Can't wait to start our life in a new home. Such unbelievable conversations continued. I transferred important data to my own smartphone. After that, I headed to a specific location to find out who this Kristen was. One day, after returning home from work, I found many bags piled up at the entrance. What is all this? I've decided to live with my mom instead of you, who don't do housework. You decided to live together without consulting me? This is my house. You have no right to complain about my decisions. Since I'm paying for the remittances and living expenses, I should have a say. It's better with mom here, so you should leave. Scott coldly responded to my monthly remittances of $2,300 to his family. And my mother-in-law present also blamed me. A wife who doesn't do housework is useless, she said, smiling as if she hoped I would be driven out. Realizing it was futile to continue with these people, I made my decision. Then, I calmly replied with a smile. Really? All right, I'll leave this house. Really? Are you serious? But I'll make sure you pay for your infidelity. Infidelity? What are you talking about? Scott began to get flustered at my sudden accusation. You mean Kristen, the 27-year-old receptionist at your workplace, right? You're thinking of inviting her to this house instead of me? Don't be ridiculous. I can't entertain such baseless fantasies, but I do have proof. I counted. I showed him the screenshots of emails saved on my phone. I had gone to Scott's workplace to dig up information about Kristen and caught them entering a hotel secretly, capturing the moment in photos. Seeing this, Scott, realizing he had no way out, started making weak excuses. We've been arguing a lot lately, and I'm really stressed. Mom says she can't take it anymore with such a wife, but that doesn't justify infidelity. Why would you do such a thing? I had no choice. Kristen is the one for me, Scott declared. His words, enamored by a younger woman, filled me with disgust. The effort I had put in for such a man now seemed utterly futile. That's enough. In return, you'll pay the compensation for your infidelity. And I'll claim it from Kristen too. I don't have money. You know that, Scott said. Then work with Kristen to build a proper life. Your mom will help with the housework, right? Then there should be no problem, I retorted. My mother-in-law, unaware of Kristen's existence, was visibly shocked by this revelation. But she quickly regained her composure and sharply told me, a young and attractive woman like Kristen is more suitable for our family than a terrible wife like you. Leave Scott's house immediately. To her words, I calmly responded, then first, please sign this, and took out a divorce paper I had prepared from my bag, urging Scott to sign. Scott, confused, asked, when did you prepare this document? The day you told me to leave the house. I got it right after you said that, I quietly answered. Scott, surprised but ultimately, signed the document. I also signed the divorce paper on the spot and said, then, I'll submit this to the city office. Regarding my belongings, I'll arrange for a moving company to transfer them as soon as I find a new place. I added, I want you out as soon as possible. My mother-in-law yelled at me. That day, I packed the necessary items in a bag and headed to my parents' house. They were surprised by my sudden return but warmly welcomed me, understanding something from my expression. The next day, I took a few days off and started taking new actions. First, I submitted the divorce paper to the city office and then began looking for a lawyer for the divorce proceedings and compensation claims. I also started searching for a new place to live. It was a busy time, but I felt fulfilled, advancing my own life. My deepest wish was to have no further involvement with that in-law family. I found a stylish apartment suitable for a single person and asked the moving company to arrange the relocation. I returned home just for the day of the move. Scott was at work, but his mother was there. The movers took out my belongings, furniture, and appliances one by one. Are you taking everything? The house will be so empty. These are all things I bought. When we married, I used my savings to buy the furniture and appliances instead of you providing a house. If the house is registered in Scott's name, then these items are mine. My mother-in-law couldn't argue and was visibly frustrated. After moving to a luxury apartment, I started enjoying living alone. I could use all my income for myself. Thanks to working overtime, I got promoted and my salary increased. This lifestyle continued for about 3 months, and then I started receiving numerous calls from my mother-in-law. I regretted not blocking her, but finally gave in to her persistent calls. "Oh, Claire. Finally, I got through. What do you want? Please, can you come back? What? I thought you wanted me to leave? I'm sorry. I've reflected on it. I want you to send $2,300 to my account like before." How self-centered she was. According to her, Scott's workplace affair was exposed, and he couldn't secure regular employment, resorting to part-time jobs. Kristen and Scott had started living together, but she disliked living with his mother, who then returned to her old home. With no more remittances, she struggled to live on her pension alone. "I have nothing to do with you anymore. I refuse." I firmly declined and set my phone to reject her calls. I also blocked Scott's number, wanting no further involvement. However, a few days later, Scott ambushed me outside my workplace. "Claire, I'm sorry. Can we start over? I'm in trouble." I was perplexed seeing him bowing on the street. Scott said he tried living with Kristen, but she couldn't do housework. After the affair was discovered, he felt out of place at work and quit. Kristen, tired of their financially challenging life and constant quarrels, quickly left him. "It's too late. I have no intention of seeing you again. If you ambush me again, I'll call police." Wait, I ignored his shouting and hurried home. Later, through my lawyer, I received $30,000 in compensation and an additional $15,000 from Kristen. I heard Scott had resorted to borrowing money through dubious means and was now juggling several part-time jobs to pay off his debts. My mother-in-law had started working part-time again and was living frugally. They were at odds, blaming each other. After leaving the company and breaking up with Scott, Kristen was working night shifts to repay her debts. Meanwhile, I adopted a small dog in my new apartment and am enjoying peaceful, happy days, looking forward to my next wonderful encounter.